I did overnight pharmacy deliveries for about 2 years. This was in the Phoenix area. From late 2019 through 2021, the job was pretty niche basically. I worked for a 24-hour pharmacy that offered emergency delivery services for medications. If someone needed a prescription filled urgently and couldn't leave their house, they'd call the pharmacy and I'd deliver it. Most of my deliveries were to elderly people, people recovering from surgery, or parents with sick kids who needed antibiotics or whatever. The hours were rough 10 p.m. to 6 a.m., Thursday through Sunday, but the pay was solid and the deliveries were usually straightforward. The company had strict protocols. I had to verify the person's identity, get a signature, and confirm that I was handing the medication to the right individual. No leaving it at the door, no exceptions. Controlled substances required even more verification: ID check, signature, sometimes a photo for the records. Most people were grateful. They'd answer the door in their pajamas, sign for the meds, thank me, and that was it. Simple. But there was one delivery that still makes me uneasy when I think about it. It happened in January of 2021. It was a Saturday night, around 2:30 in the morning. I got a call from the pharmacy dispatcher. New delivery, controlled substance, needed ASAP. The address was in a suburb on the west side of Phoenix, a neighborhood I've been to before, mostly single-family homes, middle-class area. I picked up the medication from the pharmacy, a bottle of prescription painkillers, standard post-surgery stuff, and headed to the address. The GPS took me into a residential neighborhood. Quiet streets, houses with desert landscaping, a few streetlights. I found the address a single-story ranch-style house, beige stucco, 2-car garage, typical for the area. The porch light was on, but it wasn't a normal white or yellow light. It was red, not like a dim red bulb. A bright, vivid red light that lit up the entire front of the house in this unsettling crimson glow. Audio cue. Low hum. I sat in my car for a moment, looking at the house. I'd never seen a porch light like that before. It was so bright and so red that it looked almost theatrical, like a stage light. I checked the delivery notes. No special instructions. Just the address and the patient's name, 𝗵𝘃𝗿𝗄. I grabbed the medication bag and walked up to the front door. The red light was even more intense up close. It cast everything in this harsh, monochromatic glow. My hands looked strange in the light. The door, the walls, the concrete all tinted deep red. I rang the doorbell. I waited. No sound from inside, no footsteps, no voices. I rang again. After about 30 seconds, I heard a lock turn. The door opened a few inches, held by a chain. A man's face appeared in the gap. Middle-aged, maybe late 40s, pale skin, dark eyes. He looked tired. His hair was messy, and he was wearing a white undershirt. "Pharmacy delivery from 𝗵𝘃𝗿𝗄, I said. He stared at me for a moment without saying anything. His eyes had this strange, unfocused quality, like he was looking at me, but not really seeing me. "Yeah," he finally said. His voice was flat, quiet. "I need to verify your identity and get a signature," I said. "Can I see your ID?" He didn't move. He just stood there, staring at me through the gap in the door. "Sir, I need to see your ID." "Right," he said. He closed the door. I stood there on the porch, bathed in red light, waiting. I could hear faint movement inside the house. A drawer opening. Something being moved. The door opened again. This time the chain was off. The man stood in the doorway holding a driver's license. I took it and checked the name, 𝗵𝘃𝗿𝗄. The photo matched, though he looked healthier in the picture. I handed it back. "I need you to sign here," I said, holding out my electronic signature pad. He took the pad and signed. His hand was shaking slightly. He gave it back to me. I handed him the medication bag. "Is there anything else you need?" I asked. It was part of the protocol to make sure the patient didn't have questions about the medication. He looked down at the bag in his hands. Then he looked back at me. "Do you hear that?" he asked. I paused. "Hear what?" "The knocking." I listened. I didn't hear anything except the faint hum of the air conditioning unit on the side of the house. "I don't hear any knocking, sir," I said. He nodded slowly. "It's in the walls. It's been going on for 3 days." I didn't know what to say. He was clearly dealing with something: pain, medication side effects, stress. I didn't know. It wasn't my job to engage beyond the delivery. "You should call someone if you're concerned," I said carefully. "A family member or your doctor." He looked past me toward the street, like he was checking to see if anyone else was there. "They're waiting," he said quietly. "Who's waiting?" He looked at me again. His expression didn't change. "The ones who did this to me." A chill ran down my spine. I took a small step back. "Sir, are you safe? Do you need me to call someone?" "I'm fine," he said. "Thank you for the delivery." And then he closed the door. I stood there for a moment, unsure of what to do. The whole interaction had felt wrong. His tone, his demeanor, the things he was saying, it all set off alarm bells. But he'd accepted the delivery. He'd signed for it. Technically, my job was done. I walked back to my car and sat in the driver's seat. I looked back at the house. The red porch light was still on, casting that eerie glow over everything. I could see the front door closed and the windows on either side dark inside, curtains drawn. I called the pharmacy dispatcher and told her about the delivery. I mentioned that the patient seemed disoriented and said some strange things. She said she'd make a note of it and inform the pharmacist in the morning. I drove away and tried to shake off the uneasy feeling. 2 nights later, Monday night, I got another delivery to the same address. Same name, 𝗵𝘃𝗿𝗄. Different medication this time, something for anxiety. I really didn't want to go back there, but it was my job. I arrived at the house around 1 a.m. The red porch light was still on. Same vivid, unsettling glow. I walked up to the door and rang the bell. No answer. I waited a full minute, then rang again. Nothing. I knocked on the door. "Pharmacy delivery for 𝗵𝘃𝗿𝗄." Silence. Audio cue. Distant dog barking. I tried calling the phone number on file. It rang 4 times and went to voicemail. I left a message saying I was at the address with a delivery and needed him to come to the door. I waited another few minutes. Still nothing. According to protocol, if the patient didn't answer and it was a controlled substance, I was supposed to return it to the pharmacy and attempt redelivery the next day. But something about the situation felt off. The red light was on. The house didn't look abandoned. And after the strange conversation 2 nights ago, I was worried that maybe something had happened to him. I walked around the side of the house, looking for another door or a window where I could see inside. The side yard was narrow and dark. There was a gate leading to the backyard, but it was locked. I shined my phone's flashlight through the gaps in the gate and saw a small concrete patio, a sliding glass door, and more windows. The sliding glass door was open, not wide open, just a few inches. Like someone had opened it and forgotten to close it all the way. That set off every alarm in my head. It was January. Cold at night, even in Phoenix. No one leaves a door open in the middle of the night unless something is wrong. I pulled out my phone and called 911. I told the dispatcher that I was at a residence for a delivery. The patient wasn't answering, and I could see that a door was open. I said I was concerned for the person's welfare. She said officers were on the way and told me to wait outside and not enter the property. I went back to my car and waited. The red porch light stayed on, bathing the front of the house in that same crimson glow. The police arrived about 8 minutes later. 2 officers. I explained the situation, the previous delivery, the patient's strange behavior, the open door. They went to the front door and knocked. No answer. They walked around to the back, and I saw their flashlights moving in the yard. A few minutes later, one of the officers came back to the front and called for backup. I felt my stomach drop. An ambulance arrived about 10 minutes later. Paramedics went inside. I stayed in my car, watching, trying to piece together what was happening. Eventually, one of the officers came over to me. "Did you interact with the resident previously?" he asked. "Yeah. I delivered medication to him 2 nights ago. He seemed disoriented. Said some strange things. What kind of things? I told him about the knocking in the walls, the comment about people waiting outside. The officer wrote it down and asked for my contact information in case they needed a statement. What happened? I asked. Is he okay? The officer hesitated. We found him inside. He's deceased. Looks like it's been at least a day or two. I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. I delivered to him 2 nights ago, I said. Saturday night. He answered the door. He signed for the medication. The officer looked at me for a long moment. What time was that? Around 2:30 a.m. He wrote it down. I sat in my car for a while after the police finished talking to me. I watched as the paramedics brought a stretcher out of the house. There was a body bag on it. The red porch light was still on. One of the officers went up and unscrewed the bulb, finally turning it off. The sudden absence of that red glow made the house look normal again. Just another suburban home in the middle of the night. I later found out from the dispatcher that the medical examiner estimated 𝗵𝘃𝗿𝗄 had been dead for approximately 72 hours before he was found. 72 hours. That was 3 days. I delivered medication to him on Saturday night at 2:30 a.m. I saw him. I checked his ID. He signed for the medication. We had a conversation. If the medical examiner was right, 𝗵𝘃𝗿𝗄 had been dead since Wednesday or Thursday. So who answered the door on Saturday night? Who signed for the medication? Who looked at me with those dark, unfocused eyes and told me that people were waiting? Audio cue, silence. I quit that job 2 weeks later. I told them it was for personal reasons. I didn't explain further. I still think about that delivery sometimes. I think about the Red Porch Light and the man standing in the doorway, shaking as he signed his name. I think about the open sliding glass door and the house sitting silent while I stood on the porch, knocking. And I think about the fact that somewhere there's a signature in the pharmacy's records. A signature from a delivery on Saturday night. A signature from a man who had been dead for 3 days.